There was a quietness in the hall, the kind that only exists when something unusual is about to happen. People weren't scrolling their phones. They weren't whispering or coughing or adjusting their seats. They were waiting. Two people sat across from each other, one, an icon known across the world for her beauty, her activism, her sharp voice. And across from her, a child maybe 10 years old. Dressed in a simple white hijab and a long, modest dress. Hands calmly resting in her lap. Eyes full of something ancient. The woman spoke first. "You're 10. Maybe younger. Why are you wearing that scarf?" The child didn't blink. She answered without hesitation. "Because it reminds me of who I really am." A pause. That wasn't the answer expected. "And who are you exactly?" "I'm someone who wants to be seen for her words, not her looks. I'm someone who believes I'm more than my hair or my skin. I'm a soul. And my soul doesn't need decoration." Some chuckles in the audience. Some raised brows. The woman smiled politely. "But do you really understand what it means? Or is it something your parents told you to do?" The girl nodded slowly. "They taught me. But they never forced me. I saw my sister wear it. She looked strong. Like a queen. And I thought, I want to be like that too." "Strong?" the woman echoed. "Yes. Strong enough to go against what the world wants from me." The woman leaned forward. "But doesn't the world want you to be free?" The girl smiled gently. "Freedom isn't showing everything. Sometimes it's the strength to hide what's sacred. The world says be bold. Be loud. Show yourself. But my faith says be dignified. Be pure. Be meaningful. I chose the second. But you're missing out." Came the next line. "Hair flying in the wind. Dancing in the sun. Choosing your outfit without anyone telling you what's modest and what's not. I still dance. I still run. I still giggle until my stomach hurts. But my hijab doesn't stop me from being me. It stops others from deciding who I should be." Her voice wasn't proud or angry. It was peaceful. Settled. "You speak like someone much older. I read the Quran with my mom. We read about Mary. You call her Mary, right? We call her Maryam. She wore a scarf too. No one called her oppressed." The woman's smile faded slightly. "But that was thousands of years ago." The girl nodded. "And we still remember her, not because of her hair, but because of her heart." There was silence for a moment. The woman adjusted her posture. "But don't you think it sends the message that girls are responsible for what men think? That they have to cover because men can't control themselves? That's not what my hijab means. My scarf isn't about fear. It's about value. We cover things that are precious. Not because we're afraid someone will steal them, but because we know their worth. But isn't modesty possible without covering the head? Maybe. But for me, hijab is not just fabric. It's a flag. A reminder. A promise. Every morning when I tie it, I tell myself, I am enough as I am. No one needs to see more to believe me. And if one day you just don't want to wear it, then I won't. But I don't think that day will come. Because I've already found something that makes me feel safe in a way I can't explain. Why would I give that up? But your age. I may be 10. But some truths don't need years to settle in the heart. Some truths arrive early and stay forever. A soft gasp rippled through the audience. She continued. My hijab doesn't limit me. It protects me. From judgment. From trends. From people who think my body defines me. The woman leaned back. She was listening now, not to reply, but to understand. Where I come from, she said, girls are taught to show confidence. To walk with their head high. To own their beauty. Don't you think hiding it sends the wrong message? I do walk with my head high. My scarf doesn't bend my neck. And confidence, to me, is knowing I don't need to impress anyone to be respected. And what about those who say hijab is oppression? They've never heard me speak, have they? A moment passed. The girl leaned in just slightly. I wear it with choice. With love. With full awareness. That's not oppression. That's strength. The woman softened. What would you say to girls who feel ashamed of their faith? Who feel like covering makes them backward? I'd say, you were made by the most merciful. You don't need to perform for the world. Walk like your mother carried you with pain. Stand like your ancestors prayed for you to be guided. And never apologize for your modesty. The woman's throat tightened. Something about that last line echoed too personally. You're very sure of yourself, she whispered. The girl smiled. I'm sure of my Creator. That's enough. And if I say you're brainwashed? I'd say, so is everyone who thinks beauty means less clothing. Every system trains minds. I just chose a different trainer. A hush again. You could hear the air breathe. She glanced up. Maybe the world will change its lens one day. Maybe it will stop seeing hijab as hiding, and start seeing it as holding on to something deeper. Something untouched. The final question came quietly. Do you think you're more free than me? I don't need to be more free than anyone. I just need to be free in front of God. There was no applause yet. Just stillness. Then, slowly, quietly, someone began to clap. Then another. And another. And within moments, the room was filled with the sound of people not just applauding, but admiring. Not just a little girl, but a soul, wrapped in strength. The applause faded, but the silence that followed wasn't empty. It carried weight. Respect. Reflection. She leaned slightly forward again, this time not with suspicion but with curiosity. I want to ask you something deeper, she said, her tone no longer confrontational, just genuinely searching. In your religion, why can't women lead prayers? Or be imams like men? Why are men allowed to marry multiple women? Why does Islam give men more rights than women? The question wasn't sharp, but it pierced through the air like a needle. The child didn't rush to answer. She took a small breath, her eyes drifting up for a moment as if consulting a sky no one else could see. I think we confuse rights with sameness, she said finally. Equality doesn't mean identical. It means value without competition. A few murmurs echoed through the crowd again. But the girl kept speaking. If I plant a rose and a cactus in the same soil, and then complain why one withers without water and the other thrives, am I being fair? She looked gently at the woman across from her. Men and women are made differently. Not unequally. Just differently. One is not above the other, they are partners. Each has strengths. Each has roles. But why do men get to lead prayers? Why not women? Because leadership in prayer isn't about superiority. It's about responsibility. And men are held accountable for that role in this life, and in the next. But don't you want that power too? She smiled. I already have power. Just a different kind. I don't need a microphone to speak truth. I don't need to stand in front to reach God. But don't men have more privileges? No. They have more duties. Islam didn't give men 4 wives as a prize. It gave them 4 times the responsibility, the justice, the accountability. And even that, with conditions most men can't fulfill. The woman blinked, as if the words had rearranged something in her mind. I thought your faith limited you, she said. My faith liberates me. It doesn't tell me I can't lead. It tells me I lead in different ways. At home. In children's hearts. In the womb, where men can never lead. But what about inheritance laws? Isn't it unfair that women get less? She nodded. That's only in some cases. But do you know that in Islam, a woman's wealth is hers alone? She doesn't owe a penny to her husband, father, or brother. Meanwhile, the man must provide, no excuses. The hall was silent again. She continued, Inheritance isn't about favoritism. It's about economic duty. If I don't have to spend anything, and my brother must provide everything, is it still unfair that he gets slightly more? She let the question hang. The woman across from her wasn't arguing anymore. She was processing. You speak with such clarity. Where did you learn all this? The girl smiled faintly. From the Quran. From my mother's eyes. From the way my grandmother never bowed her head, even when life bent her back. And you believe that Islam respects women? I believe Islam was the first voice that shouted dignity for women when the world buried their daughters alive. Her voice trembled, just slightly. I believe Islam made me valuable before I could even speak. Before I could cook. Before I could marry. It made me sacred just because I exist. The older woman looked down, her fingers curled around her notes. The audience watched not just a dialogue, but a shift, something invisible, yet undeniable. You said earlier that you're more than a face, the woman whispered. The child nodded. Yes. I'm a mind. A heart. A servant of God. And if someone says your faith oppresses you, then they haven't seen me here. Sitting in front of you. Answering without fear. Holding my voice like a sword. She looked out toward the crowd. My Islam doesn't need defense. It needs to be seen without bias. The woman met her gaze again. And what would you say to the women of the world? Especially those who feel torn between their culture and their faith? She closed her eyes for a second. Then opened them slowly. I'd say, don't let the world define your worth. Don't let magazines decide your beauty. Don't let noise drown your purity. Hold your head high. Because Allah made you not from man's foot, to be stepped on. Not from his head, to be above him. But from his side, to be loved beside his heart. Silence. The kind that aches in the chest. The woman, once questioning, was now quiet. One of the cameras zoomed in slowly, capturing not just the child's expression, but something far greater. In that moment, she wasn't a 10-year-old girl. She was a legacy. Of truth. Of power. Of honor. And across the room, more than a few eyes had begun to well up. Stillness again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was holy. The lights above glowed steady, but the mood in the hall had shifted again. It was no longer a contest of ideas. It had become something deeper, an unfolding of truths that had long gone unheard. She leaned in again, this time slower, more hesitant. You speak with such certainty, she said. About roles, faith, purpose. But we live in a world of science now. Satellites, AI, medicine, psychology. We've decoded DNA. We've landed on Mars. Do you still believe in a God you can't see? The question hung in the air like smoke. The girl tilted her head slightly. Her eyes weren't offended, they were reflective. Have you ever seen love? She asked quietly. The woman blinked. What do you mean? I mean, have you touched it? Measured it? Captured it in a jar? No, came the slow reply. But we feel it. The girl nodded. That's how I believe in God. I don't need to see the sun when its light warms my skin. I don't need to touch the wind to know it's there when it brushes past my face. And I don't need to see Allah to know He's the one who gave me eyes to see anything at all. A hush. A pause. No music, no flashing lights. Just her voice, steady and sincere. I'm not against science. Islam isn't against science. In fact, the Quran was the first book that told people to read, to explore, to think. It talks about stars and oceans, the development of the embryo, the balance of the universe. How could a man in the desert 1,400 years ago describe what we only discovered with microscopes and telescopes centuries later? She looked toward the audience, eyes sharp. Science explains the how. But faith explains the why. The older woman sat back slightly, her eyes narrowing, not with criticism, but with wonder. But what about prayer? She asked. Do you really think whispering words into the air can change what's going to happen? Isn't that just superstition? The girl didn't flinch. When someone's mother is dying, she said, and the doctors say there's no hope, but the child still kneels and begs God to heal her, what do you call that? Desperation, the woman replied. I call it love, she said gently, and hope, and faith. And sometimes, that mother lives. Not because science failed, but because mercy intervened. But it doesn't always work, came the next objection. People pray. People still suffer. People die, the girl nodded. Yes. Just like medicine doesn't always cure. Just like justice doesn't always prevail. Does that mean we stop trusting doctors? Stop seeking justice? A quiet gasp rose from somewhere in the back of the room. Prayer isn't a button to press. It's a rope you hold on to. Not to change God's plan, but to show you trust Him, even when you don't understand it. The woman's lips parted slightly, unsure of what to say. The girl spoke again, softer now. Allah is not my emergency contact. He's my first call, not my last. I talk to Him not because He needs me, but because I need Him. Another silence. Another shift. The woman took a breath. Her voice dropped. What if? She asked. What if God was just something created by people who couldn't explain things? A crutch for the weak? The girl didn't react immediately. She looked down at her hands, then up again. Her eyes were calm, almost shining. Then why do the strongest people still kneel in prayer? Why do billionaires feel empty? Why do scientists cry at sunsets and mothers whisper to the sky when their children sleep? She leaned in, voice steady. Because we are more than cells and blood. Because we are made of longing. And you're sure Islam is the answer to that longing? I didn't choose Islam because I was born into it. I chose it because every time I doubted, it gave me peace. When I asked, it gave me answers. When I was afraid, it gave me courage. But there are so many religions, the woman said. So many claims of truth. What makes you so sure yours is right? The girl smiled. Truth doesn't scream. It whispers. And when I read the Quran, it doesn't try to impress me with miracles. It invites me to reflect. It doesn't ask me to worship a man or a statue or a feeling. It calls me to the one who created all of them. The woman rested her chin on her hand. This wasn't a debate anymore. It was witnessing. The girl continued. Islam tells me I was created with purpose. That this life is not a coincidence. That my breath is a gift. My time a trust. My body a loan. And that one day, I will return to the one who gave me all of it. She paused. Then whispered something. And that is not superstition. That is surrender. For a moment, no one moved. Then the woman's voice, fragile now. But you're just a child. How do you know all this? Don't you ever doubt? The girl smiled sadly. I have. I still do. But I turn my doubting to dua. I ask, and He answers, sometimes with signs, sometimes with silence. But even His silence feels safe. There were tears now and more than one pair of eyes. And finally, the girl looked at her again. You asked if faith and science can coexist. I think faith is the light that helps you walk through the lab without arrogance. That helps the heart stay humble even when the brain becomes brilliant. A long pause. Science gave us airplanes. Faith gave us direction. Science gave us medicine. Faith gave us healing. Science gave us knowledge. Faith gave it meaning. And with that, the light above her seemed just a little warmer. She wasn't defending anymore. She was witnessing. To a world beyond wires. Beyond atoms. A world where prayer had weight. And the unseen felt more real than ever. The lights in the hall felt warmer now, as if the silence itself had grown softer. There was no longer tension in the air, just curiosity. Genuine, open, human curiosity. The next question came slowly, almost regretfully. Why do you think the West sees Islam as something dangerous? Backward? Restrictive for women? Why are so many people afraid of your religion? The words floated gently, but their weight was heavy. The girl took a moment before answering. Her small fingers brushed lightly against the edge of her dress. Then, without a trace of hesitation, she looked up. Because people fear what they don't know. The room listened, leaning into the stillness. If someone only ever saw thunderstorms, she continued, they would believe the sky is violent. But if no one showed them the sunrise, how could they know it brings light? She shifted slightly in her seat. Islam is not what they've shown on TV. It's not men with guns shouting words they don't live by. It's not women crying in black veils or buildings falling. Islam is not fear. It's peace. It's prayer. It's a mother's tears in the last third of the night, begging God to protect her children. The woman listening said nothing, only nodded slightly, as if the words were gently tearing down walls she didn't know she had built. The girl continued, Do you know what the word Islam means? There was no reply. It means surrender. Not to people. Not to power. To the Creator. To the one who gave me breath. That surrender brings peace. That's the root of our faith. She looked around the room, her gaze fearless. But when someone only sees us through headlines, war zones, or angry faces, they never get to meet the little girl who prays for her teacher. Or the father who wakes his son for dawn prayer with a kiss. Or the shopkeeper who closes his store to feed the poor during Ramadan. She paused. They see bombs. We see blessings. The woman spoke again. But what about the rules? The restrictions? People say Islam controls every part of life. The girl smiled. Yes. Because every part of life matters. Islam teaches us how to eat, speak, sleep, treat others, not because it wants to limit us, but because it wants to purify us. Her voice grew steadier. The world tells us, do what you feel. But feelings change. Islam tells us, do what's right, even when it's hard. That's real freedom. The woman furrowed her brow gently. So, you don't think your religion is too harsh? Harsh? She echoed. It tells me not to lie, not to hurt, not to steal. It tells me to guard my eyes, my tongue, my pride. It teaches me to forgive, even when I'm right. That's not harsh. That's healing. Another pause. The girl leaned forward. Islam doesn't chain me. It saves me from the chains the world normalizes. The woman shifted in her seat. But what about the violence? The extremists? The radicals? Surely you've heard those stories. She nodded solemnly. I have. And I hate them more than you do. Because they use my religion like a shield for their cruelty. But their Islam is not mine. Her voice grew firm. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, never harmed a woman, never raised his hand in arrogance, never took revenge for himself. He forgave his enemies. He cried for orphans. He stood when his daughter entered the room. If you want to know Islam, start with him. The audience was silent again, but this time it was reverent. The woman lowered her gaze slightly. Something inside her was no longer resisting. You said earlier that Islam is peace, she murmured. But how do you deal with people who hate you just for your scarf, your name, your prayer? The girl smiled. I remember what the Prophet said when people threw stones at him. He didn't curse them. He prayed for them. He said, maybe their children will believe. And you know what? They did. A lump caught in the woman's throat. She looked at the girl, no longer as an opponent, but as something else. Maybe a mirror. The girl looked down at her lap, then back up. I've been stared at in stores. Whispered about. Even laughed at. Once, a boy pointed at me and said, "Look, a terrorist." I cried that night. But then my father told me, they see with fear because they don't see with knowledge. Your job is to be a walking truth. She paused. So I walk. In hijab. In hope. In silence sometimes. But never in shame. A single tear slid down someone's cheek in the second row. The girl finished softly. Islam didn't make me silent. It gave me a voice that doesn't need to scream. The woman sat very still. She had no notes left. No questions prepared. Only thoughts. Only echoes. And then, gently, she said, "You're teaching me things I didn't know I needed to learn." The girl didn't respond. She just smiled. And sometimes, that's louder than words. The atmosphere in the room felt different now. What began as a debate had softened into something gentler. It was no longer a question of who's right, it had become a search for meaning. A journey both were walking, step by cautious step. The woman's voice was quieter now, as if she wasn't only asking the girl, but also asking herself. If your God is so merciful, why is there so much suffering in the world? The girl looked down for a long moment. Her fingers fidgeted slightly, a rare show of vulnerability. Then she breathed in. Pain is a language most people don't want to learn, she said. But sometimes, it's the only one our hearts understand. A silence settled. The woman waited. My mom once told me, she continued, that Allah doesn't promise a life without hardship. He promises purpose in every hardship. There's a difference. Her voice remained calm, but there was a weight behind it. When a seed is buried underground, it's not being punished. It's being prepared. Darkness isn't always destruction, it's sometimes the beginning of growth. The woman leaned in. But what about innocent children? Orphans? Wars? Earthquakes? How do you explain those? The girl's eyes dropped. For a second, the strength in her face was replaced by something softer. Sadder. I ask those questions too, she whispered. And I cry sometimes. But then I remember, this world isn't Jannah. It's a test. And tests aren't always fair, they're revealing. She looked up. Allah doesn't oppress. We do. Humans build bombs, not God. Humans starve others, not the one who created food. The woman's breath caught. But still, she said gently, couldn't a loving God stop it? He could, the girl said. But then there would be no free will. No choices. No growth. And no chance to rise after falling. She leaned slightly forward. If we lived in a world where no one got hurt, where no one failed, we'd forget how to feel. We'd stop needing each other. And we'd never learn who we really are. The woman sat back, her arms crossed, now not in resistance, but reflection. People say that belief is easy for those who live in comfort. But I see people in war zones, praying harder than anyone. I see orphans smiling. I see refugees still thanking God. The girl looked at her deeply. They've lost everything, but they still believe. Maybe they know something we don't. A long pause followed. The woman's next words came slower. But why would a loving God create hell? Eternal punishment? Isn't that too cruel? The girl didn't flinch. Allah is not just loving. He is also just. If there is no justice, then what comfort is there for the one who was abused? Or murdered? Or oppressed? She folded her hands. If someone kills a child, and dies without punishment, would you call it love if God said, it's okay, come to paradise? That's not mercy. That's injustice. The woman nodded, eyes heavy now. So, you believe in heaven and hell? I believe in accountability, she said. And I believe that mercy outweighs his wrath. The Prophet said that if Allah's mercy were divided into 100 parts, He only sent one to this world. The rest is saved for the day we return to Him. Her voice softened further. Every breath we take without thanking Him is a chance. Every mistake we make followed by repentance is a door. Allah doesn't want to punish. He wants to forgive. But we have to ask. The woman blinked slowly, a tear glinting in the corner of her eye. You speak of God like He's always with you. He is. But you can't see Him. I don't need to. I feel Him when I wake up with a heartbeat. When I hear my father recite Quran. When I see a bird carry food to its chicks. She smiled gently. I see His mercy in the way my tears feel warm when they fall. That line struck something. The woman looked down, wiping the corner of her eye with her finger. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. The girl filled the silence. I think pain brings us closer to God, because it reminds us how little control we really have. She paused. And yet, we still pray. That is faith. The woman finally spoke, her voice shaky. You're so young. But you sound like someone who's lost something. The girl gave a faint nod. I lost my brother when I was 8. A car accident. It broke something in me. A collective inhale from the room. The girl didn't stop. I screamed. I questioned. I begged God to bring him back. He didn't. But He brought something else instead. What? Peace. Not all at once. Not overnight. But slowly. Like rain softening dry land. Her words landed gently, like feathers falling. I used to wonder why Allah didn't save him. But now I wonder how He saved me. The room was quiet. Even the air seemed to pause. The woman reached out slightly, resting her hand on the table between them. She said nothing. The girl smiled. You don't have to understand everything to trust that it's working for your good. Sometimes the most faithful thing you can do is cry and say, even this has meaning. The woman looked at her, not as a child. Not as an opponent. But as a guide. How did you survive that pain? She responded without blinking. I didn't. Allah carried me through it. And with that, something in the woman broke. Not from weakness, but from truth. She looked down, her voice a whisper. I don't know if I'd believe yet, but I wish I had what you have. The girl didn't push. She simply said, Ask Him. He's always listening. Even in silence. Especially in silence. The woman looked up. For the first time, she smiled with something more than politeness. Hope. There was a stillness between them now. No longer adversaries, they were companions in conversation. The kind of silence that doesn't need to be broken, only deepened. The woman leaned back slowly, as if weighing everything that had been said so far. You know, sometimes I wonder, she began gently. In a world filled with science, progress, human rights, do we still need religion? Isn't it just an ancient system in a modern world? The girl sat quietly for a moment, then smiled. Not with arrogance, but with kindness. People have been asking that question for centuries, she said. But somehow, they keep coming back to it. The woman raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I mean, we keep building faster trains, stronger planes, smarter machines. But the one thing we can't seem to build, she placed her hand gently on her chest, is peace in here. A few heads nodded slowly in the crowd. Technology can make life easier, she continued, but it can't make life meaningful. It can teach us how to fly, but not where to go. It can scan our hearts, but not heal them. The woman tilted her head, intrigued. So you think religion gives direction? I think it gives roots. In a world that moves so fast, people feel lost. Everyone's chasing something. Money, beauty, fame, but even when they catch it, they're still hungry. She leaned slightly forward, voice calm. Faith doesn't remove hunger. It reminds you what you're truly starving for. The woman breathed in slowly. And what is that? Purpose, the girl said. Identity. Belonging. The answer was simple. But it echoed like thunder. We're taught how to do things, she added, but not why. Religion gives you the why. The woman folded her arms lightly, but not in defensiveness, more like wrapping herself in the moment. But don't you think religion divides people? Wars, politics, judgment. The girl nodded gently. People divide people. Religion only reminds them who they are. She took a breath. Islam doesn't say, hate the one who is different. It says, honor the children of Adam. That means everyone. We're not enemies. We're family with forgotten roots. The woman's eyes softened again. I guess I've just seen people use religion to justify hate. The girl's voice didn't rise, but it sharpened. Then they weren't practicing religion. They were abusing it. She leaned in slightly. If someone uses a knife to heal and another uses it to harm, you don't blame the knife. You blame the one who forgot how to use it. A few people in the hall stirred, some whispering, some simply blinking in deep thought. The woman sighed deeply. Sometimes I envy people of faith. They seem to have a center. The girl nodded. It's not that we have no struggles. We do. But we carry them with a sense that there's someone watching, helping, guiding. She glanced upward briefly, then back. Faith isn't about having no storms. It's about having an anchor when they come. The woman rested her chin on her hand again. You're saying without faith, people drift? Yes. Because without a creator, you're just here by accident. But Islam says no. You are chosen. You are here with a reason. Your pain, your joy, your silence, it all has weight. She smiled faintly. When you believe your life is a gift, you treat it differently. The woman looked at her closely now. And if someone says, I don't need faith, I have freedom. I decide who I am. What would you say to them? The girl responded without pause. I'd ask, how long does that freedom last? Till your heart breaks? Till someone walks away? Till your beauty fades? Or till death knocks? Her voice grew softer. We're told to be whoever you want. But what if who you want to be keeps changing? Then who are you really? A deeper hush settled. Faith doesn't tell me who I should pretend to be. It reminds me who I already am. And who is that? A servant. A soul. A creation with a creator. The woman whispered now, barely audible. You're so grounded. So sure of who you are. The girl gave a soft smile. That's what faith does. It connects you to something eternal, so you're not shaken by what's temporary. The woman looked down. I've searched in many places, she murmured. Books. Travel. Activism. Love. But still, something feels missing. The girl didn't answer immediately. Then, quietly, she said, Maybe you're not missing something. Maybe you're missing someone. The woman looked up, startled. Someone? She nodded. The one who made you. Who never left you. Who's been waiting for you to turn, even slightly, so he can run to you with open arms. There was silence. Real silence. Not the kind that happens when people have nothing to say, but when they realize they'd finally heard something they were afraid to hear. And then the girl said something even softer. I think the heart knows God before the mind does. That's why when we cry, we look up, even if we don't believe. The woman was still. She placed her hand on the table again, this time not as a gesture, but a surrender. I don't know if I believe yet, she whispered. But I think I want to. The girl reached across gently, not to touch, but to reassure. Then he's already near. Closer than your veins. The room was still. No one clapped. No one dared. Because something far greater had just arrived. Clarity. The room had grown heavy, not with conflict, but with something more sacred. The silence between the two no longer felt like distance. It felt like a bridge, suspended, fragile, and waiting for one of them to cross it. The woman leaned slightly forward. She wasn't taking notes anymore. She wasn't preparing counters. Her hands were clasped now, fingers slightly trembling. "You know," she began softly, "I've listened to everything you've said. And I can't lie, some of it has shaken me. Deeply." The girl nodded, saying nothing, only listening. "I've spent my whole life searching. Reading about philosophies. Buddhism, atheism, even paganism. I've meditated in monasteries. Stood silent in churches. But nothing ever stayed. It all felt like sand slipping through my fingers." The girl spoke now, slowly, carefully. "Maybe because it was never meant to fill the space God created for himself." The woman looked down, her voice suddenly smaller. "But there's a part of me that resists. Even now. I feel this truth pressing against my chest, and I still hesitate." "Why?" The girl responded gently, with no judgment in her eyes. "Because truth demands surrender. And surrender requires the death of ego." She paused. "Accepting Islam isn't just saying I believe in God. It's saying I'm no longer the God of my life. And that is terrifying." The woman nodded slowly. "I think you're right. I've built an identity, a public voice, a worldview. I've spoken out about freedom, about choice, about not needing religion. And now, here I am, listening to a 10-year-old girl tell me everything my soul secretly knew." She chuckled, but it wasn't humor, it was pain. "Is that what pride is?" she whispered. "Knowing the truth, but not wanting to kneel?" The girl looked at her kindly. "Even I have pride," she said. "Sometimes I think I know better. I can do this alone. But then Allah humbles me. A sickness. A loss. A moment where I realize I'm not in control." She leaned slightly forward. "And I think he does that because he loves us." The woman lifted her eyes. "Loves us by humbling us?" "Yes," the girl said. "Because he knows what arrogance does. It blinds the heart. It whispers you are enough without your maker. But no one is." The woman sat back, breathing deeply. "Sometimes I feel like I'm on the edge of something, but afraid to fall." The girl smiled. "Maybe you're not falling. Maybe you're finally flying." Another silence. Then the woman laughed again, soft this time. "You really believe all of this, don't you? With every cell in my body." The woman's voice became thoughtful. "Do you ever fear what you might lose for believing?" The girl nodded. "Yes. Friends. Opportunities. Even safety. But I fear more what I'd lose without belief, myself." That line landed with quiet thunder. The woman sat motionless, eyes watery but not crying. "I envy you. You have nothing to prove, yet you've already won." The girl shook her head gently. "I haven't won. I'm still walking. But I know which direction I'm facing." There was a deep pause. Then, the woman's voice, low and sincere. "What if I told you? I believe in God. I believe in the oneness. I believe Muhammad is a messenger, but I'm still not ready to say the words." The girl's eyes didn't widen. Her voice didn't rush. She simply smiled. "Then your heart has already whispered them. Your lips will catch up. But what if I changed my mind tomorrow?" "Then you're human," the girl said. "But Allah is not impulsive. He doesn't love in phases. He loves forever." A few more seconds passed before the woman broke the silence again. "You know, when I was younger, I used to look at Muslim women and feel sorry for them. I thought they were silenced. Trapped. But now, after talking to you, I feel like I've been the one living in a cage." "Not a cage," the girl said softly. "Just a room without windows. You've been standing near the door. You just never opened it. And Islam is that door? No, the girl whispered. Islam is the sky outside it. The woman finally smiled, a real one this time. Her eyes shone not with tears, but with light. I don't know where I go from here. The girl tilted her head. Closer. Closer to what? To the one who's been waiting for you since before you were born. The woman lowered her head, both hands covering her mouth. Her shoulders trembled slightly. And the girl, she simply waited. No pushing. No preaching. Just presence. Finally, the woman looked up, her voice barely a whisper. Will he forgive me, for all the years I ignored him? He already has, the girl said. The moment you asked? The camera would never capture what happened next, not with pixels, not with light. But those in the room knew. Something sacred had begun. The lights in the hall dimmed slightly, but not out of design. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath. The moment had grown so quiet, one could hear the shifting of knees in the audience, the faint hum of the air conditioner, the slow inhale and exhale of hearts being stretched by truth. The woman sat still. Not frozen, but humbled. Across from her, the girl watched without judgment. Without pressure. She didn't lean forward. She didn't speak. She simply waited, with the patience of someone who had seen seeds bloom after seasons of silence. The woman closed her eyes. I never imagined, she whispered, that a 10-year-old could teach me everything I thought I knew was incomplete. Her voice cracked, but she steadied it. I've spoken at world forums. I've held refugees in my arms. I've fought for justice. But I never fought for my own soul. I was so busy saving others. I forgot I needed to be saved too. The girl's voice came at last, soft and slow. Sometimes we lose ourselves trying to save the world, when all the world really needed was to see us find God. The woman's lips trembled. She looked at the girl with eyes that no longer held resistance, only longing. But what if I fail him? What if I'm not good enough? You will fail, the girl said gently. We all do. But Allah is not asking for perfection. He's asking for sincerity. That's enough. A tear slipped down the woman's cheek. I've said and done things that I'm ashamed of. So have I. The girl smiled softly. But he still answers my prayers. Still wakes me up each morning. Still wraps me in safety when I forget to ask. That's not a God who wants to punish. That's a God who wants you home. The woman looked away for a moment. Then back. What if I say the words, and regret it tomorrow? The girl leaned forward slightly now. Then you ask him to keep your heart firm. And if it wavers, you ask again. He loves when we return, even 1,000 times. The woman nodded slowly. My whole life I thought Islam was a prison. But now I see, it was the key. The cage was my ego. My fear. My ignorance. She wiped her face, then gave a slight laugh through tears. And a little girl held the key the whole time. The girl's eyes shimmered. I didn't come to win a debate, she said. I came to remind you, you're not too far gone. You're not too late. And you're not alone. The woman leaned back in her chair. The audience was silent. No whispers. No coughs. As if the entire world had paused to let her speak. She looked down. And then, slowly, she raised her head. Her voice was trembling, but clear. I bear witness, she whispered, that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. Gasps. From behind cameras. From behind curtains. From rows and rows of hearts that had followed the conversation not just with ears, but with souls. Some clapped. Some wept. But the girl, she just closed her eyes. And smiled. As if she had known all along. The woman covered her face. Not in shame. In relief. In awe. And then, softly, she asked, "What do I do now?" The girl opened her eyes. "Now, you live like someone who's been forgiven. You walk like someone who's been found. And you pray like someone whose voice is always heard." She stood up slowly. Walked to her. No dramatic hug. No shouting. Just two souls, one guiding, one finally arriving. The woman stood too, uncertain. And then, the girl reached out. Not with hands, but with her heart. "You're not becoming someone new," she whispered. "You're becoming who you always were, before the noise." The woman exhaled, long and deep. And for the first time, she looked not at the audience, not at the cameras, but upward, with eyes that finally saw, and lips that finally remembered how to pray.